Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourselves for a tale of glorious chaos, brutal humor, and a redemption arc that will carve its way into your heart. This is the story of a fiend, a friend, and the best girl who ever lied through her teeth. This is the complete life story of Power. Our introduction to Power is anything but heroic. Imagine a scene drenched in ominous music and shadows. She isn't a charming sidekick, she's the blood devil, a fiend who has taken over a young girl's body. She's manipulative, wildly selfish, and her only loyalty is to her own survival and her beloved cat, Meowie. She's the character you love to hate, the chaotic neutral force who looks at the protagonist and sees a useful pawn. She frames Denji, she uses everyone, and her pride is as massive as her ego. She was, in a word, the worst, and we absolutely adored her for it. To truly understand the glorious, messy, and profound journey of Power from Chainsaw Man, we must first immerse ourselves in the sheer, unadulterated chaos of her introduction. Her debut is not merely an entrance, it is a statement of purpose, a declaration of a character archetype being turned on its head. We are not meeting a future hero in their humble beginnings. We are not meeting a tsundere who secretly has a heart of gold. We are meeting a fiend, a devil inhabiting a human corpse, and she behaves exactly as such, embodying a primal, selfish id that is as shocking as it is mesmerizing. Imagine the scene, painted with the grim, grimy palette of a horror-tinged shonen anime. The setting is not a glorious battlefield, but a confined, dark apartment, a stage for deceit and survival. Our protagonist, Denji, is fresh off his own rebirth and is operating on the most basic of desires, a roof over his head and a full stomach. He is sent on a mission, not to slay a world-ending threat, but to partner with a mysterious, captured fiend. The atmosphere is thick with unease. And then, we see her, Power, with her wild, unkempt hair, her sharp, predatory teeth, and those iconic yellow eyes with their pinpoint red pupils that seem to see other people not as beings, but as tools or obstacles. She is chained, a visual metaphor for her restrained nature, but her attitude is anything but captive. From her very first line, the script is flipped. She doesn't plead for help. She doesn't thank her saviors. She barks orders, her voice laced with a condescending arrogance that suggests she is the one in charge, and the humans around her are merely her incompetent servants. This is our first, crucial lesson in Powerology. Her ego is not a facade, it is the very core of her being. As the blood devil, her existence is intrinsically tied to one of the most fundamental fears of all living creatures, the fear of blood, of injury, of the vital life force spilling out. This isn't a conceptual fear like the fear of darkness or control, it is visceral, immediate, and personal. It grants her a sense of innate superiority. In her mind, she is not a monster, she is an aristocrat of terror, and humans are merely walking, talking blood bags for her to use and discard. Her selfishness, therefore, isn't just a personality quirk, it is a survival mechanism honed by existing as a manifestation of a primal fear. To be selfless is to be weak, and to be weak is to be eradicated. The masterstroke of her introduction, however, is the revelation of her motivation. What could possibly drive such a creature? A thirst for power, a desire for revenge, a world domination scheme? No. Her entire initial plot is driven by the most mundane, yet for her, deeply personal goal, to save her cat, Meowie. This detail is pure genius. It immediately creates a complex and conflicting moral landscape for the audience. On one hand, here is a being who would willingly sacrifice an entire city block of humans without a second thought. On the other hand, she is willing to lie, manipulate, and betray to rescue a small, defenseless animal she calls her subordinate. This isn't a redemptive quality yet, it's a bizarre, selfish obsession. She doesn't love all creatures, she loves her creature. Meowie is her possession, her one anchor in a world she otherwise views with contempt. This single-minded focus makes her simultaneously more monstrous and more strangely relatable. It's a chaotic neutral alignment in its purest form. Her personal comfort and the well-being of her pet are the only laws that govern her actions. And then comes the betrayal. This is the pivotal moment that cements her initial role as an antagonist to Denji's journey. She successfully manipulates him, using his own naive desires for a normal life and his burgeoning trust against him. She crafts a lie about a cursed Denji needing to defeat the bad devil to lift it, all to use his power for her own ends. When the plan goes awry and she believes Meowie is dead, her grief is not quiet or sorrowful, it is a torrent of rage and blame directed squarely at Denji. The ensuing fight is not a heroic team-up, it is a violent, brutal clash between two forces of nature, one who wants to save a cat, and one who just wants to survive the fallout. Power, in her fury, even uses Denji's own blood against him, a ultimate act of violation that underscores her complete lack of empathy or loyalty. She sees his body, quite literally, as a resource to be expended. This initial arc concludes not with a heartfelt apology, but with a forced partnership under the stern watch of public safety. Power does not have a change of heart, she is simply cornered. Her cooperation is extracted under duress, the chains now metaphorical but no less real. She sits in Makima's apartment, eating snacks and complaining, a prisoner in a gilded cage. She doesn't bond with Denji and Aki, she tolerates them. She insults them, lazes about, and maintains her towering sense of self-importance. She is, in every sense, the worst roommate imaginable. This elaborate setup is why Power's eventual redemption is one of the most earned and powerful in modern anime. The narrative does not cheat by making her secretly soft from the start. It allows her to be exactly what she is, a selfish, arrogant, chaotic fiend. We are not asked to like her initially, we are asked to be fascinated by her. We witness her not as a hero in waiting, but as a force of nature learning, against its will, to exist within a society. Her debut is a perfect storm of monstrous logic, relatable if selfish motivation, and glorious, unapologetic personality. It establishes a foundation so flawed, so broken, and so brilliantly characterized that the subsequent construction of her friendship with Denji feels not just satisfying, but nothing short of a miracle. If Power's debut was a symphony of pure, unadulterated chaos, then the next movement of her life was a discordant, violent, and unexpectedly beautiful duet. The forced partnership with Denji under the roof of public safety devil hunters was the crucible in which her crude, selfish character would begin its first, clumsy metamorphosis. This was not a typical shonen alliance forged in mutual respect, it was a toxic, hilarious, and brutally honest relationship built on a foundation of shared trauma and a complete lack of social grace. They were two feral animals pushed into the same kennel, and the resulting dynamic was nothing short of electric. Imagine the scene, straight out of a dysfunctional slice of life anime, Makima's apartment, a sterile and quiet space suddenly invaded by two forces of nature. On one side, Denji, a boy raised in a gutter, driven by the most basic, hormonal desires for food, touch, and a semblance of a normal life. On the other, Power, a primordial fiend who viewed chores as a personal insult, personal space as a myth, and Denji's dreams as pathetic. Their initial cohabitation was a war of attrition. They bickered over food, they fought over the television. They hurled insults with the creativity of seasoned street brawlers, with Power's towering ego clashing constantly with Denji's blunt, simple-minded pragmatism. She called him pathetic for his crush on Makima, he called her a lazy freeloader. This wasn't animosity born of true hatred, but the raw, unfiltered friction of two entities who had never learned to play well with others. Yet, within this constant state of low-grade warfare, something crucial was happening. They were mirrors for one another. Denji saw in Power a being even more selfish and unhinged than himself, which, in a strange way, made his own desires feel less shameful. Power, in turn, saw in Denji someone who was utterly unimpressed by her devilish nature. He wasn't scared of her, he was just annoyed by her. He didn't treat her as a majestic blood devil, but as a messy, irritating roommate. This was a revolutionary experience for Power. For the first time, she was being related to not as a monster or a tool, but as a person, an infuriating one, but a person nonetheless. Their shared status as outcasts, Denji as a poor, uneducated human, and Power as a fiend despised by both humans and devils, created a twisted sense of camaraderie. They were the bottom feeders of public safety, and that was a bond no one else could understand. The true turning point, the moment the spark of genuine connection began to flicker, was their shared mission to take down the leech devil. Thrown into a life or death situation, their chaotic dynamic had to be weaponized. There was no time for lofty speeches about friendship or justice. Their cooperation was born of pure, desperate survival instinct. Denji, in a moment of uncharacteristic strategic brilliance, used Power's own arrogant and predictable nature as a tool, baiting the leech devil by betting on Power's inability to ignore a challenge to her pride. And Power, in turn, used Denji not as a pawn, but as a component, a living blood bank she could use to unleash her full power. In the heat of battle, their insults became a bizarre form of communication, their violent tendencies became a coordinated strategy, and their mutual selfishness found a common goal: don't die, and kill the enemy. They fought not as hero and sidekick, but as partners in chaos. After their victory, there was no heartfelt thank you, no warm embrace. There was just the shared, exhausted aftermath, a silent acknowledgement that they were, for better or worse, an effective team. This was the seed from which their friendship would painfully, reluctantly grow, a bond proven not in words, but in blood and shared triumph over a mutual threat. It was the beginning of Power learning that having a partner, even an irritating one, was far more advantageous than facing the world alone. The culmination of Power's journey represents one of the most breathtaking and heartbreaking character transformations in modern anime, a seismic shift from a being of pure self-interest to one capable of the ultimate self-sacrifice. This evolution culminates in a moment that defies her very nature, rewriting the definition of her existence in a storm of blood and tears. The journey from the fiend who would betray Denji for her cat to the friend who would obliterate herself for him is the core of her tragic brilliance. To appreciate the magnitude of her final act, we must first recall the foundational principle of her being. Power, as the Blood Devil, was programmed for self-preservation. Her consciousness was born from humanity's fear of blood, a fear intrinsically linked to mortality and injury. Every action, every manipulation, every arrogant declaration was, at its core, a defense mechanism designed to ensure her own survival and supremacy. The concept of sacrifice for another was not merely alien to her, it was antithetical to her fundamental programming. She viewed others as tools, as blood bags, as stepping stones. This is what makes her final contract with Denji not just a noble death, but a metaphysical rebellion against her own essence. The catalyst for this rebellion was the slow, grudging, and often violent formation of a bond she never sought. Her cohabitation with Denji and Aki, though filled with incessant bickering and insults, created a distorted reflection of family. For the first time, she was not just feared or used, but tolerated. She was seen in all her messy, lazy, arrogant glory and, against all odds, allowed to exist within a social unit. Denji, in particular, became her mirror. He was unimpressed by her devilish grandeur, called out her lies, and fought her on equal terms. This raw, unfiltered dynamic forged a connection that bypassed her defenses. He wasn't a subordinate or a master, he was, as she would later declare, her first friend. This bond, fragile and fiercely denied, became a new core programming, one that eventually overrode her primal instincts. When the moment of ultimate crisis arrived, with Denji broken and at the mercy of the controlled devil's wrath, Power's choice was not a hesitant one. It was a definitive, explosive rejection of her selfish past. In offering the ultimate contract, to use all of her blood, to sacrifice her form, her memories, and her very existence to save him, she performed an act of pure, unadulterated love. This was not a calculated move for future benefit, it was the absolute giving of the self. The very substance of her power, blood, which she had always hoarded and used for her own gain, was now spent completely for another. In that moment, the Blood Devil, the embodiment of a fear related to loss of self, became the embodiment of selfless giving. Her final words are the key to understanding the completeness of her transformation. Find the Blood Devil and make her your friend, whatever form I take, I know I'd want to be your friend. This is not a promise of easy resurrection. It is an acknowledgement of total annihilation. She knows the her that is speaking will cease to exist. The being that will eventually reform in hell will have no memory of Denji, of Niaoui, of their chaotic, beautiful life together. Yet, her faith in the bond they forged is so absolute that she believes it could transcend even the cycles of death and rebirth. Her sacrifice was the final, glorious proof that she was no longer just a fiend, but Power, a unique, irreplaceable individual who had learned the value of a friend and proved it with the last drop of blood in her body. The true measure of a character's impact is not merely in the life they lived, but in the indelible mark they leave upon the world and the hearts of those who remain. Power's story possesses a devastating, beautiful finality, yet her legacy is anything but finished. It lives on as a driving force, a haunting promise, and a ghost that shapes the future long after her final, brilliant act of sacrifice. Her end was not an exit, but a transformation from a character in the narrative to the very soul of a mission that defines the protagonist's journey forward. This legacy is carried almost entirely on the shoulders of Denji, and it manifests in two profound ways. The first is the weight of the promise. In the wreckage of their shattered world, Denji is left not just with grief, but with a concrete, monumental task: find the Blood Devil and make her your friend. This is not a vague wish to remember her fondly, it is a direct order, a contract that gives him a purpose far beyond surviving or being a hero. It becomes his North Star, a quest that will likely define the remainder of his life. This promise elevates power's importance from a fallen comrade to a central, ongoing objective. Denji is no longer fighting just for himself or for a vague concept of good, he is fighting, and living, for the chance to reconnect with the one person who understood his feral, broken nature and accepted him completely. Her absence becomes a perpetual presence, a ghost that rides alongside the Chainsaw Man's heart. The second layer of her legacy is more subtle but equally powerful, the transformation she wrought in Denji's understanding of love and connection. Before power, Denji's desires were simple, physical, and born of deprivation, food, touch, a girl. His crush on Makima was a one-sided, idealized obsession with a distant, untouchable figure. But his relationship with power was real. It was built on shared trauma, mutual insults, collaborative laziness, and violent protectiveness. It was messy, honest, and unconditional. She was his first genuine friend, and in her final act, she demonstrated a love so profound it involved the utter annihilation of the self. This experience redefined Denji's entire emotional landscape. He now knows what real, earned, familial love feels like, and he knows the staggering cost it can demand. This knowledge will forever color his future relationships, setting a bar of authentic, selfless connection that no simple infatuation could ever meet. Furthermore, Power's legacy cements her status as a tragic, iconic figure in the annals of her world. In a narrative saturated with cosmic horror and cynical power struggles, her arc stands as a brilliant, bloody flare of genuine emotional transformation. She is the fiend who learned to love, the liar who kept her most important promise, and the selfish creature who made the ultimate selfless choice. Her story is a testament to the idea that even beings born from humanity's darkest fears are capable of change, capable of forging bonds that defy their very nature. Her legacy is therefore one of hope, a brutal, painful hope, but hope nonetheless. It's the hope that connection can be found in the unlikeliest of places, that redemption is possible even for the most wretched, and that a promise to a friend can be a more powerful engine for a hero than any desire for glory or power. The Chainsaw Man may continue to roar, but a part of that engine will always be fueled by the memory and the mission given to him by his best friend, Power.